I'd like now to move to a presentation from CNSC as outlined in CMD 14H5 and 14H5.A. I understand that Dr. Newland will make the presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Binder. Good morning, members of the Commission. My name is Dr. David Newland. I am the Acting Director General of the Directorate of Nuclear Cycle and Facilities Regulation. Today we are making two requests of the Commission. First, we are requesting that the Commission accept the Environmental Assessment Report, and secondly, we are requesting that the Commission issue a licence to allow the proponent to proceed with the phased remediation of the Gunnar Legacy Site. With me today are Dr. Patsy Thompson, Director General of the Directorate of Environmental and Radiation Protection and Assessment, Mr. Don Howard, Director of the Waste and Decommissioning Division, and Ms. Nicole Frigo of the Environmental Division. In addition, we have several CNSC staff to support. I will now have Mr. Howard proceed with staff's presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Binder and members of the Commission. Again, for the record, my name is Don Howard, and I am the Director of the Waste and Decommissioning Division, which is responsible for the licensing, compliance, and enforcement at the Gunnar Remediation Site in northern Saskatchewan. With me today is Nicole Frigo, who will present the slides under the fourth bullet and answer any questions that the Commission may have on the Environmental Assessment Report. Our presentation will provide an overview of the environmental assessment and the license application for the Gunnar Mine Site. Following this overview, we will provide CNSC staff's conclusions and recommendations. First, I would like to begin by providing some background information on the former Gunnar Mine Site. The Gunnar deposit was discovered in July 1952 and operated as both an open pit from 1955 to 1961, and then as an underground mine from 1957 to 1963. The mine ceased operation in 1964. During its operation, the Gunnar site consisted, as I mentioned, an open pit and an underground mine. It also included a uranium mill with a capacity of 2,000 tons per day, 2 acid plants, and uranium processing buildings. Due to the remoteness of the Gunnar site, it also included a community consisting of a number of residential, public, administrative, and technical buildings. The operation produced approximately 4.4 million tons of tailings and approximately 2.7 million tons of waste rock. The Saskatchewan Research Council has been contracted to manage this project, which is funded by the governments of Saskatchewan and Canada. This slide provides a geographic context for the location of the site. The former Gunnar Mine site is located on the Cracking Stone Peninsula, about 26 kilometers southwest of Uranium City. Apart from a few seasonally occupied cabins and 3 outfitter lodges, the nearest population center is Uranium City, consisting of approximately 80 individuals. The former Gunnar Mine site was abandoned in 1964, and all buildings, tailings management areas, and waste rock piles were left as is. During visits to the site by CNSC staff, there was evidence that the local population visited the site primarily to recover building material from the many buildings on the site. CNSC staff identified significant concern for site safety related to the degraded condition of the buildings that had been neglected on the site for 50 years. As a result, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission issued an order to SRC in July 2010 to address public safety concerns on the Gunnar Mine site. As a result of CNSC Order 10-1, all buildings and other man-made structures at the site were demolished. The order was eventually closed in 2011. In April 2007, the Saskatchewan Research Council submitted a proposal or intent for the remediation of the Gunnar site. This initiated the environmental assessment. In December 2010, Saskatchewan Research Council applied for a license to remediate the Gunnar site. Around the same time, the CNSC issued Order 10-1 requiring that all buildings and other man-made structures at the site be demolished. After completion of numerous detailed studies required for the environmental assessment, Saskatchewan Research Council resubmitted their request for a license in May 2014 on a more accurate site data and the absence of demolition activities from the proposed license. This slide provides an overview of the ownership of the Gunnar site, the responsible regulatory agencies through time, and the entities responsible for site safety and management. CNSC staff would like to describe how this site fits into the broader efforts that have been applied to the larger problem of legacy mine sites in Canada. A legacy site is a contaminated property whose ownership has succeeded to the government. These sites are all the responsibility of the provincial, territorial, or federal governments. There were 90 identified as orphaned uranium mines. Of these, 5 have uranium tailings. Gunnar will be the last of these sites to be remediated under a CNSC license. In 2004, the remaining legacy 85 uranium mine sites, all without tailings, were permanently exempted by the Commission from the requirement to hold a license for the possession, management, and storage of nuclear substances related to previous mining activities. These are sites that have physical and radiological characteristics indistinguishable from conventional mines. Based on geotechnical and environmental characteristics, the Gunnar site can be divided into distinct site components. The Gunnar main tailings, which will remain in place and will be covered. The Gunnar central tailings, which will remain in place and will be covered. The Langley Bay tailings will remain in place, and the exposed tailings will be covered. The open pit will be left in place as an aquatic environment, with the understanding that water treatment may be required. The waste rock pile will either be relocated or used for tailings cover, or it can remain in place and a cover added. This is all part of the decision tree approach. This part of the presentation will deal with the licensing. The licensing process is initiated by the submission of an application, which CNSC staff received in May 2014. The application and supporting documentation submitted by the applicant must demonstrate that they are qualified and that the application is complete, meaning that they conform to the required information outlined in the regulations. The Gunnar Remediation Project will be executed in 3 phases. Phase 1 will initially allow for the continued monitoring and maintenance of the site. During this phase, activities such as additional site investigation will be undertaken, construction of the required infrastructure such as road and work camps, and the mobilization of heavy equipment. It is CNSC staff's understanding from the applicant that this phase will be completed by 2016. Phase 2 is a whole point, which will require an authorization to proceed. In this phase, remediation activities will be initiated. It is anticipated that Phase 2 will begin in 2016 and is expected to take approximately 5 years to complete. Finally, Phase 3, which is also a whole point, will provide for the long-term monitoring and surveillance of the site. This phase will remain in effect until such time as the site can be transferred to the Saskatchewan Institutional Control Program, approximately 2031. The timing of the transfer will depend on the acceptance of the site into the Institutional Control Program by the Government of Saskatchewan. During all phases of the project, qualified CNSC inspectors from the Waste and Decommissioning Division, supported by qualified inspectors from the Uranium Mines and Mills Division, and supported by specialists from the Environmental Risk Assessment Division, will conduct inspections throughout the project. In support of their license application, Saskatchewan Research Council has submitted the following document to support Phase 1, monitoring and maintenance operation under the proposed license. These documents will be updated or revised or amended for Phase 2 and form part of the whole point. The documents include the Gunnar Site License Manual, which outlines the operating policies and procedures and information on such items as occupational health and safety, emergency medical due to the remoteness of the site, and wildfire prevention, the Gunnar Site Environmental Protection Program, which details the best practices and mitigation measures that will be used at the site, the Gunnar Site Communication Program, which provides information on the communication and consultation activities, the Gunnar Site Quality Program, which confirms that operational processes and programs are systematically identified, controlled, monitored, and continuously improved. And finally, the Gunnar Site Training Program, identifying the training needs for both employees and contractors. CNSC staff have reviewed the above-mentioned documentation and have found it to be satisfactory. Saskatchewan Research Council, in accordance with the License Condition Handbook, cannot proceed with any Phase 2 activities until all documents listed on this slide as supporting Phase 2 have been accepted by the CNSC. The documentation listed for Phase 1 and the documentation listed on this slide will form the licensing basis documentation. Multi-criteria decision analysis will be used to plan the Gunnar Site remediation, and in particular, in planning the remediation of the tailings and waste rock piles. CNSC staff will review these multi-criteria decision analysis against Environment Canada 2011 guidelines for the assessment of alternatives for mine waste disposal. The criteria used by the licensee will be reviewed by CNSC staff for technical feasibility, social acceptance, environmental impacts, and costs. When reviewing the quality of the data supporting the multi-criteria decision analysis, CNSC staff will use the Mine Environmental Neutral Drainage, or MEND, guidance documents published by Natural Resources Canada. Notably, staff will use the MEND technical guidance for cold region cover systems design and the MEND prediction manual on predicting drainage chemistry from waste rock piles and tailings. For tailings remediation, CNSC staff will review the cover design to ensure that performance objectives are met and that the technology is consistent with best practices. During and after completion of construction, CNSC staff will confirm that cover materials meet specifications and ensure construction quality assurance of the system. CNSC geotechnical specialists will use best practice to review the Gunnar Site pit and shaft remediation plans. Finally, CNSC staff will review the follow-up programs against CSA Standards N288 series on environmental monitoring, human health, and ecological risk assessment to assure that the environment, public safety, and health have improved as a result of the proposed activities. Prior to making a licensing decision for the project, an environmental assessment needs to be conducted and that the conclusions of the environmental assessment be accepted. I will now ask Ms. Nicole Frigo to present the findings of the environmental assessment.
Good morning, Dr. Binder and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Nicole Frigo. In the next few slides, I will present the environmental assessment process for the Gunnar Remediation Project, summarize the environmental assessment findings and conclusions, as well as provide a description of the Aboriginal and public consultation process for the project. An environmental assessment under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012 is required for activities listed in the CIA 2012 regulations. The purpose of an EA is to predict the environmental effects of a specific project, to minimize or avoid adverse environmental effects before they occur, and to incorporate environmental factors into decision-making. The EA also provides opportunities for Aboriginal and public participation. A positive EA decision is required prior to a CNSC license being granted. The Gunnar Remediation Project was subject to an environmental assessment under both the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act and the Saskatchewan Environmental Assessment Act. The EA was conducted in a coordinated approach, with each government retaining its ability to make project-related decisions on matters within its authority. Because the mandate of the CNSC under the Nuclear Safety and Control Act includes a requirement to protect the environment and health and safety of people, the CNSC often reviews environmental assessments concurrently with a license application, as is the case for the proposed Gunnar Remediation Project. In 2007, the CNSC determined that the project would require a comprehensive study under the former Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. On July 6, 2012, the former Canadian Environmental Assessment Act was repealed and the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012 came into force. In accordance with SIA 2012, comprehensive studies under the former SIA Act, such as the Gunnar Review, would automatically continue to follow the requirements of the former SIA Act. However, on October 7, 2013, the Federal Minister of the Environment excluded the comprehensive study of the Gunnar Remediation Project, and it is now considered to be a designated project under SIA 2012. CNSC staff are here today to recommend that the Commission accept the Environmental Assessment Report for the Gunnar Remediation Project. The Provincial Environmental Assessment was approved by the Minister of the Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment on August 20, 2014. In accordance to the Saskatchewan Environmental Assessment Act, ministerial approval was given to the Saskatchewan Research Council to proceed with the remediation activities to reduce human and ecological health risks associated with the former Gunnar uranium mine site. The minister concluded that the Gunnar project will reduce human and ecological health risks to acceptable levels, and any adverse environmental effects associated with the project can be eliminated or minimized. Approval under the Saskatchewan Environmental Assessment Act was therefore granted to the Saskatchewan Research Council for the Gunnar Remediation Project, including the requirements that the proponent proceed with the project in accordance with the statement, that they provide notification of any changes to the project, and that the proponent follow the requirements of the laws and regulations of the province of Saskatchewan and all other applicable laws and regulations. Under the SIA 2012, an environmental assessment must take into account the environmental effects of the project, including the significance of effects, as well as requirements of the follow-up program. The CNSC, as the responsible authority for this EA, assessed the potential effects that the project is likely to have on the environment. This assessment also looked at any changes to the environment and how that would potentially impact Aboriginal peoples. The assessment also considered any change to the environment on the health and socioeconomic conditions, physical and cultural heritage, the current use of lands and resources for traditional purposes, and any structure, site, or thing that is of historical or archaeological significance based on information provided by the Saskatchewan Research Council in their environmental impact statement and supplemental findings. Expert advice provided by federal authorities such as Natural Resources Canada, Environment Canada, Health Canada, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and discussions with provincial government through the cooperative review informed CNSC staff's assessment and conclusions. For a number of the site aspects, while many alternatives were identified, selection of a single preferred remediation option was not identified because of the remaining uncertainties due to lacking site characterization data. For areas where uncertainty still exists, the remedial plan is to proceed with the project in 3 licensing phases, with license hold points to ensure that all decisions leading to a preferred option are informed by additional site characterization data. I will speak to the aquatic, terrestrial, and human health assessments in further detail on the following slides. CNSC staff have chosen to provide further information on these specific items to address potential concerns in these areas which are of interest to the public. The completion of the Gunnar Remediation Project will reduce or eliminate contaminant loadings to the aquatic environment. This will result in measurable improvements in the quality of surface water that is released to Lake Athabasca and to lake sediment quality over longer periods of time. Remediation of the Gunnar site will result in reduced exposures for humans and other species. Potential remedial actions at the site will result in contaminant concentrations below site-specific remedial objectives. Stabilization of Langley Bay tailings will include mitigation that will likely improve fish habitat conditions by creating improved spawning substrate for some fish species. Shortjaw cisco, which is listed as threatened under Schedule 2 of Canada's Species at Risk Act, may be present in the local study area. The project is expected to improve fish habitat in the long term. Please note that the cisco represented on the slide is not the shortjaw cisco. Turning to the terrestrial environment, it is anticipated that the remediation project will have an overall positive effect on the terrestrial environment through the establishment of native vegetation within reclaimed areas and on vegetative covers. New wetland habitats are also planned for area adjacent to and between the South Waste Rock Pile, as well as in Zemo Bay. These new wetland habitats will provide additional value to several species, including moose and waterfowl. Woodland caribou, which is listed as threatened under Schedule 1 of Canada's Species at Risk Act, may be present in the regional study area. The project is expected to improve caribou habitat in the long term. The last specific topic I will address is human health. A key objective of the project is to minimize future risks to the public. A human health risk assessment was conducted to assess potential risks to human health associated with exposure to radiological and chemical contaminants present at the Gunnar site based on current site conditions. The risk assessment assumed that a toddler and adult were to occasionally visit the site for approximately 1.5 months a year during warmer months for fishing, hunting, and gathering activities. The toddler and adult were also assumed to bring back food to their homes for consumption over a 6-month period. The pathways considered in the assessment included ingestion, skin contact with soil, and inhalation of dust. Results of the risk assessment indicate that under current conditions, casual access to the site will not result in risks to human health, and that the consumption of traditional foods such as hare, moose, and berries is not a cause for concern. Remediation of Langley Bay tailings will reduce the contaminants in surface water, but the water and fish consumption advisory will remain in place until such time that follow-up monitoring data show acceptable levels of contaminants in fish and water. The protection of the environment is a requirement of both the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act and the Nuclear Safety and Control Act. Saskatchewan Research Council's Environmental Protection Program is reviewed by CNSC staff as part of the license application process. The adequacy of the program is tested against the available standards and guides, as well as the technical expertise of CNSC staff. Once approved, CNSC staff will verify the implementation of the licensee's programs through inspections and other compliance tools. The results of the environmental protection programs are documented in quarterly or annual reports. These reports are required to be submitted to CNSC staff by the licensee and are reviewed for trends and to identify any unexpected impacts. A CNSC-approved EA follow-up program is required for the Gunnar Remediation Project. The purpose of an EA follow-up program is to verify the accuracy of conclusions and predictions made during the EA regarding potential environmental and human health effects, and to determine or confirm the effectiveness of the measures implemented to mitigate adverse environmental effects of the project. A follow-up program was included in the EA report. Further refinement of the follow-up program will be made by the Saskatchewan Research Council in consultation with CNSC staff, the Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment, federal authorities, Aboriginal groups, and members of the public as decisions in Phase 2 are finalized. In summary, CNSC staff have concluded that the proposed project is not likely to cause significant adverse environmental effects, taking into account the mitigation measures outlined in the EA report and in the proposed license. I will now briefly describe the CNSC's approach to Aboriginal consultation. Following this, I will provide you with details on what consultation activities have taken place to date and upcoming opportunities for Aboriginal groups and members of the public to participate in the Gunnar Remediation project. The CNSC adopts a proactive approach to Aboriginal consultation and aims to understand the concerns of local Aboriginal peoples, communities, and organizations in relation to the activities we regulate by building relationships and communicating effectively. The CNSC ensures that all of its licensing and EA decisions consider Aboriginal people's rights and interests and addresses them as appropriate. Since the beginning of the Gunnar Remediation project, the CNSC, Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment, and the Saskatchewan Research Council have actively consulted with identified Aboriginal groups and local communities with an interest in the project. For example, since 2007, the CNSC, the SIA Agency, the Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment, and the SRC have provided numerous opportunities to participate in the regulatory review process, including workshops, meetings, community tours, site tours, as well as letters, emails, and phone calls providing information at key points in the process. Furthermore, the SRC retained the Prince Albert Grand Council to complete a traditional knowledge and a traditional land use study for the areas influenced by the abandoned Gunnar site. The details arising from this study were used to help shape the project description, preferred remedial options, evaluations of current risks to humans and the environment associated with the abandoned Gunnar site, and assessment of the possible effects of the project. This slide provides an example of how the CNSC has provided ongoing engagement opportunities for Aboriginal groups and local communities. For example, the CNSC has notified Aboriginal groups of the project and review process. The CNSC, Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency, and the Saskatchewan Ministry of Environment hosted a public information meeting in May of 2008 in Uranium City in order to seek public input on the draft project-specific guidelines scoping document and to provide information on the EA process. The CNSC has also provided updates through letters, emails, and phone calls at key points in the process, and have encouraged Aboriginal groups to share any project-specific issues and/or concerns. CNSC staff have met with community members and leadership as part of options workshops and annual SRC community tours, and has conducted site visits with interested community members and groups. To date, CNSC staff are satisfied with SRC's Aboriginal and public consultation activities. Consultation and outreach activities will be ongoing throughout the life of the project. Aboriginal and public concerns raised to date include concern over potential human health and environmental impacts posed by the site in its current state, including potential ongoing negative impacts to Lake Athabasca. Aboriginal groups also wanted to ensure that traditional knowledge, including traditional land and resource use, was taken into consideration as part of the environmental assessment of the project. CNSC staff have determined that all project-specific concerns raised by Aboriginal groups to date have been adequately addressed through the EA report, including the proposed follow-up program, as well as through the proposed license. Funding to participate in the EA review of the project was made available to the public and Aboriginal groups through the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency's Participant Funding Program in 2008. A total of $20,000 was awarded to 4 applicants. This funding was used to facilitate public and Aboriginal participation in the EA process, including the review of EA documents. All comments received during the public review of the Environmental Impact Statement in June 2014 were taken into consideration in the federal EA report. In January of 2014, the CNSC awarded $35,000 to 5 recipients under its participant funding program to assist members of the public, Aboriginal groups, and other stakeholders to participate in the Commission public hearing today and to review licensing documentation related to the license application. All 5 applicants reviewed and commented on the license application and documents, and today, many are presenting their findings. I will now pass the presentation back to Mr. Don Howard to present the CNSC staff conclusions and recommendations for the Gunnar Remediation project.
Thank you. I will now provide CNSC staff's conclusions and recommendations. An EA under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012 was conducted for this application. CNSC staff conclude, in accordance with paragraphs 52(1) of the CIA 2012, and taking into consideration the conditions recommended by staff on mitigation measures, that the proposed project is not likely to result in significant adverse environmental effects referred to under subsection 5.1 of CIA 2012, and is not likely to result in significant adverse environmental effects referred to under subsection 5.2 of CIA 2012. The conditions with which the proponent of the proposed designated project must comply are articulated in the License Condition Handbook. CNSC staff have concluded with respect to paragraphs 24(4)(a) and (b) of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act that the Saskatchewan Research Council is qualified to carry on the activity authorized by the license and will, in carrying out that activity, make adequate provision for the protection of the environment, the health and safety of persons, and the maintenance of national security and measures required to implement international obligations to which Canada has agreed. CNSC staff recommend that the Commission take a course of action in accordance with subsection 52(1) of the CIA 2012 to determine that the project, taking into consideration the implementation of the proposed mitigation measures, is not likely to result in significant adverse environmental effects referred to in subsections 5.1 and 5.2 of the CIA 2012. If the Commission accepts the above environmental assessment recommendation, CNSC staff request that the Commission revoke the existing exemption from the requirement to hold a license for the possession, management, and storage of nuclear substance at the Gunnar site, that the Commission issue to the Saskatchewan Research Council Waste Nuclear Substance License number WNSL-WV5-3151.00/2024 for the phased Gunnar Remediation project. And finally, CNSC staff would like to note an error to this slide in that rather than seeking a delegation of authority, CNSC staff is requesting consent from the Commission for the Director General of the Directorate of Nuclear Cycle and Facilities Regulation to accept Phase 2 documentation and release the Phase 2 whole point. This concludes CNSC staff's presentation, and CNSC staff is prepared to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.